What's going on, guys? It's the Draft Nerd, and it's not quite Mock Draft Monday, but it is Mock Draft Tuesday, and I'm excited to get this out to you guys. We finally got the draft order finalized with the 49ers picking at 31 and the Super Bowl champions, the Chiefs, picking at 32. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so coming in at number 1, we got the Bears, and I'm sticking to my guns. Caleb Williams, number 1 overall. Chicago Bears are going to probably trade Justin Fields for probably a second round pick or so. I really think it's going to happen. There's been more and more reports coming out that it's almost guaranteed to happen unless they get like an insane offer, which I highly doubt will happen. So it's still going to be Caleb Williams right now. Bears fans, just deal with it, I guess. I don't know what to tell you. Coming in at number 2, we got the Washington Commanders, and this is where I'm thinking about switching it up. Jaden Daniels, his hype train is still ascending, and a few of the latest mock drafts I've looked at, they've had Jaden Daniels at number 2. So, I mean, is it a possibility? Sure. Do I think it will happen come draft night? Probably not. But for the sake of switching things up, I'm going to go with Jaden Daniels to the Commanders at number 2. I think Dan Quinn could look to get more of a dual threat quarterback. I wouldn't, completely X that off the table. So, Jaden Daniels is a very solid quarterback. He's improved every year he's played, at least at the college level. So, I think that's a fine pick. Moving on to number 3, we got the Patriots, and we're not doing trades in this draft, so we're going to have them sticking and picking. Now, it's either Marvin Harrison Jr. or Drake May. Now, if it's Jaden Daniels that falls to the Patriots, I could see them maybe going in a different direction and maybe going with a Marvin Harrison. But Drake May is widely considered the number 2 quarterback in the draft. And if Drake May falls to number 3 to the Patriots, I highly doubt that they're going to pass on quarterback. So we're going to go with Drake May, number 3 to the Patriots. At number 4, we got the Arizona Cardinals. And if Marvin Harrison Jr. falls to them, it's an easy pick. Marvin Harrison Jr. all day. He's the best wide receiver in the class, and he's probably one of the best receivers since Jamar Chase. So, easy pick for the Cardinals. Now, if the Patriots decide to go Marvin Harrison, that's where it gets a little bit interesting for the Cardinals. But that didn't happen in this scenario, so it's an easy pick. Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Cardinals. At number 5, this is another interesting pick. This is kind of where I see the draft fully starting and where a lot of different possibilities could happen. If we were doing trades, I think this could be a possible trade down spot. Especially if somehow one of the top 3 quarterbacks fall here. I could also see Brock Bowers going here, getting Justin Herbert a weapon. And with Harbaugh coaching now, I mean, he likes his tight ends, at least at Michigan. So I also have a hard time, thinking that he would take a tight end with his first pick with a new team. You could also, look to go with a blue chip quote unquote tackle in Joe Alt. Or you could look to go with a Malik Neighbors or a Odunze. There's a lot of different possibilities that could happen here, but the way I like to see it is every, great quarterback had their great tight end. With the Tom Brady's, he had Gronk. Patrick Mahomes now, who, by the way, just won a Super Bowl, 3rd Super Bowl. He has Travis Kelce. Phillip Rivers had Antonio Gates. So we're gonna look to get Justin Herbert his version of that and Brock Bowers. Moving on here to number 6, that makes the Giants' job a lot easier. I think it's between Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze. A lot of people are having Rome Odunze kind of go ahead of Malik Neighbors, and I think that's just prospect fatigue. I think they're switching it up just for the sake of it. I think Malik Neighbors is far and away in a tier of his own. I think it goes S tier is Marvin Harrison Jr., A tier, which isn't far behind, is Malik Neighbors. I think Malik Neighbors could be the number 1 receiver in most draft classes. It just so happens that Marvin Harrison's in this class. And then I think there's another tier with the Rome Odunze and maybe a Troy Franklin, something like that. I think there's a clear tier above Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze, so we're going to have the Giants going Malik Neighbors, although not to discredit Rome Odunze at all. I think he's a great talent, and I wouldn't be surprised if he goes top 10. Moving on to number 7, we got the Titans, and I know I do this almost every single time, and a lot of mock drafts do it, but if Joe Alt falls to them at 7, they're running to the podium. They're getting Joe Alt. I think Joe Alt's kind of separated himself from the other tackles in this class, like Olu Fashanu, Talise Fuaga. I think Joe Alt's in that upper tier, so getting the best tackle in the class at 7 is a steal for the Titans. Moving on to number 8, we got the Falcons, and I think this is where we could see our first defender going off the board. It could be a Nate Wiggins, a Dallas Turner, a Jared Verse, maybe a Terrion Arnold. I'm going to end up going with the Jared Verse. I think the Falcons need pass rush help. They have little to no pass rush help, especially with Calais Campbell getting up there in years. I mean, they need to get that solidified edge rusher. And so it's really between Dallas Turner and Jared Verse for me. I flip-flop between the two. I'm going to go Jared Verse here. I think he fits a bit better. He's a bit more of a powerful edge rusher. Dallas Turner has all the upside in the world and is a very solid player, but we're going to go Jared Verse this time around. Now at number 9, this is where we're going to get a little fancy and a little bit fun. Maybe make up for the first pick, Bears fans, and we're going to go with Rome Odunze. Pairing up Rome Odunze with DJ Moore and having Caleb Williams to throw the ball to him. I mean, Bears fans, you got to at least like that a little bit. I mean, Rome Odunze is a perfect 1B to DJ Moore's 1A, and so if this does happen, that's a very, very solid foundation for a very good offense. Now at number 10, we got the Jets, and I think they're going to be jumping up and down to either get Talise Fuaga or Olu Fashanu. I think that it's got to be a tackle here. You could maybe go receiver if Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors fall to them, but that's most likely not going to happen, so I'm going to be going Olu Fashanu here. In my last mock draft, I did have Talise Fuaga going ahead of Olu Fashanu, and although I think that could happen, I still think Olu Fashanu is a bit better. He's got a lot higher of an upside, and I think he's more balanced with the run and pass blocking, as Talise Fuaga is a really good run blocker, but not the most polished pass protector. And plus, Olu Fashanu is a left tackle, which is a little bit more important than a right tackle. Not saying that Talise couldn't move over to left tackle, but I think he's more suited for that right tackle role. Moving on to 11, we got the Vikings, and this could be a quarterback spot. I'm pretty sold that Kirk Cousins is going to be coming back to the Vikings next season. So we're going to turn our focus to the defensive side of the ball, and I'm going to be looking at either a Dallas Turner or a Nate Wiggins. They really need help on both ends, especially if a guy like Danielle Hunter, leaves in free agency. So I'm banking on Danielle Hunter, probably asking for a little too much for the Vikings and potentially going to another team. So we're going to get his replacement. And, Leatu Latu is a little bit more of the style of a Danielle Hunter, but I think Dallas Turner has a lot more upside, and it would be hard passing on Dallas Turner for a Leatu Latu, especially with the injury concerns of Latu. So we're going with Dallas Turner here to the Vikings at number 11. Coming in at number 12, again, another quarterback spot. It's just so hard to predict where these, second tier of quarterbacks are going to go, whether it's going to be in the first round or if it's going to wait till the second round. I mean, you seen last year with a guy like Will Levis, who was, almost a solidified top 10 pick, fall to the second round. So it's not unheard of for guys who have first round hype to fall to the second round, especially at the quarterback position. So again, could be a quarterback, but it could also be a guy like Nate Wiggins. Pairing up Patrick Surtain with another, really good cornerback is a very solid option. And I've even seen some reports of Patrick Surtain maybe getting traded. So if that does happen, then cornerback is definitely a spot we could go. But I think regardless, Nate Wiggins still on the board here, or even a Cooper DeJean, although I think teams are going to view him as a slot, and slots just don't get taken this high. So we're going to go with Nate Wiggins. I think Nate Wiggins is definitely going to be the first cornerback off the board come draft day. I think he's just got a mixture of length, coverage ability, and he's young. So, he's just got a ton of upside. Moving on to 13, we got the Raiders. Again, another quarterback destination, but I think I'm going to have the quarterbacks fall a bit in this draft, and we're going to look to go with maybe a Talise Fuaga. Getting a replacement out of that right tackle position could be a top priority for him, especially if they're going to keep Jimmy Garoppolo or maybe roll with Aiden O'Connell. Who really knows with the Raiders, but I think Talise Fuaga would be a very solid pick for him here. Pairing up Talise Fuaga on the right side with Colton Miller on the left side, that's a very good tackle duo for years to come. Moving on to the Saints, we're going to pass on quarterback again, and we're going to look to go with an offensive tackle, especially with the reports that Ryan Ramczyk's knee, and I don't even know if it's his knee. I know it's his leg. Somewhere on his leg, it's not in the best of shape, and he might even retire. So the right side's up in the air, and then also Trevor Penning is not great. So they could be looking at both tackle spots being vacant. And if that is the case, then you're definitely going to go tackle here. And I'm going to pass on a guy like J.C. Latham, who a lot of people might choose to be their tackle for. And I'm going to go with Amarius Mims. Amarius Mims is, granted, very raw and very inexperienced at the tackle position, but he's got all the tools and all of the upside. In the games that he has played, he's looked very good in. So getting a guy like Amarius Mims, he could end up being maybe a top 2 tackle in this class when it's all said and done. So getting a potential top 2 tackle at 14, I mean, sign me up for that. That moves us here to 15, and we got the Colts picking. And I mean, the Colts love their kind of freaks at the cornerback position, and Quinion Mitchell, again, had a very solid Senior Bowl. He's rising up people's draft boards super quickly. And I could definitely see him being the second or even first corner off the board come draft day. Pairing him up with Juju Brents, I mean, shoot, that's a great pairing in my opinion. Moving on to 16, we got the Seahawks, and I haven't quite done what most people do and go interior of the offensive line yet, and so I'm probably going to look to do that, especially with a guy like JPJ here. I mean, he's another guy who has been rising up people's boards ever since the Senior Bowl, and although he's listed as a center, I see him more as a guard. I mean, he weighs about 336 pounds, which if he weighs that at the combine, he would be the heaviest center ever recorded at the combine. So I think moving him over to guard, that would be very beneficial for him. And I mean, just imagine a Seahawks offensive line with Charles Cross, Abraham Lucas, and then JPJ at the guard. I mean, that's 3 out of the 5 that are, you know, an above average starter. So moving on here to 17. We're probably going to look to go receiver here because Calvin Ridley, there's a chance he doesn't return. I mean, he didn't have the best of years anyways. I mean, he was solid. He was just up and down most of the year. And then Christian Kirk, he's a slot. You know, you can't really ask too much of him. So why not get a guy like Brian Thomas who can be that outside threat and be that deep threat that Calvin Ridley just wasn't quite in 2023. So we're going to go with Brian Thomas Jr. there from LSU. Moving on to the Bengals here at 18. I think this is where we could look to go with a J.C. Latham. Getting a Jonah Williams replacement is at the top of the priority list, I would imagine. You could also look to get a T. Higgins replacement with a guy like Troy Franklin, maybe a Keon Coleman here. However, I haven't seen Keon Coleman go this high in a long time. So I think we're going to stick to the tackle position, and we're going to go with J.C. Latham. He's just a mauler in the run game, and he can also provide Joe Burrow some more protection, which is always a good thing. Moving on here to 19, we got the Rams, and I think I usually go Cooper DeJean here, and he is falling. A lot of people are going to, have a hard time believing he falls past the top 20 picks, but it's very possible, especially if teams view him more as a slot. So we're going to look to go with Leatu Latu here. I don't think Latu's injury history is going to be too big of a problem come draft day. I think he's going to pass a lot of people's medicals. I mean, he's had 2 fully healthy seasons, so, I mean, I would have a hard time thinking teams would pass up on a talent like that. Moving on to 20, we got the Steelers, and it's either going to be tackle or cornerback. And with some of the top cornerbacks still on the board, like a Terrion Arnold and a Cooper DeJean, and with most of the tackles gone, the next one up is probably like a guy like Tyler Guyton, which at pick 20 is a little rich for me, but he could definitely go in this range. So we're going to look to go with either Terrion Arnold or Cooper DeJean. And I feel like Terrion Arnold is going to be the pick here, although I think Cooper DeJean and his teammate Colin McKinstry are a bit better in my opinion. But the NFL is really high on Terrion Arnold. He's just an athletic freak, so we're going to go with him there at pick 20. Moving on to 21, we got the Dolphins, and I know I just said I don't really like Tyler Guyton this high. I think the NFL could definitely draft him this high. I mean, at the Senior Bowl, he wasn't, out of this world or anything like that, but he put on display his trades and his length, which are 2 things you can't teach. I think the Dolphins can convince themselves that they can teach Tyler Guyton, especially behind a guy like Teron Armstead. So we're going with Tyler Guyton. He doesn't have to start right away. He can learn behind a guy like Teron Armstead for a year, so I think that's a solid pick for the Dolphins. Moving on to 20, I think this is where we go cornerback. And I know Eagles fans don't really like, quote-unquote, drafting a backup cornerback. But almost every team plays 3 cornerbacks as their base defense. And with Darius Slay on the team still, James Bradbury's, Mr. Inconsistent. I think in a cornerback is a very real possibility. And, I mean, you can get linebacker in the second round. There's no linebacker worth taking with a 22nd pick. I'd be very surprised if a linebacker goes here. So, we're going to look to go with, it's hard to pass up on Cooper DeJean. I mean, Kool-Aid McKinstry is probably more of what the Eagles would like. At least Eagles fans, excuse me. So, I'm going to go with Cooper DeJean, however. I think that if the Eagles do bring back both Darius Slay and James Bradbury, Cooper DeJean can fit in that slot cornerback role and be automatically one of the top 5 slot cornerbacks in the league, in my opinion. Moving on to 23, it's hard to pass up on Jerzon Newton here. The Texans need a defensive tackle, and with both top tackles still, defensive tackles still on the board with Byron Murphy and Jerzon Newton, I think the Texans they gotta go with a defensive tackle. And I know a lot of people are hopping on the Byron Murphy train, but, I'm still on the Jerzon Newton train. I think Jerzon Newton's still my tackle 1, defensive tackle number 1, and I think he will be come draft day. Moving on to 24, we got the Cowboys, and they could look to go with a guy like Kool-Aid McKinstry, maybe a Troy Franklin. I mean, Brandon Cooks wasn't, all that. But I'm going to end up probably going with a guy like Troy Fautanu. He's got tackle guard flexibility just like Tyler Smith does. So they can decide whether they want Tyler Smith at the tackle position or if they want to try Troy Fautanu there. In my opinion, you slide Troy Fautanu there at left guard and then move on Tyler Smith to tackle, which is what they initially drafted him to be. Moving on to 25, we got the Packers, and I think it's got to be Kool-Aid McKinstry. Having Kool-Aid McKinstry fall this far is not what I usually do. I mean, Kool-Aid McKinstry is usually my, second or third cornerback off the board. So we're going to go with Kool-Aid McKinstry here. I think that's a steal for the Packers. They need secondary help badly. And pairing him up with Jair Alexander, I mean, that's a very good secondary. At least the building blocks to become one. Moving on to 26, we got the Buccaneers. And I think it's between cornerback and edge rusher. Do you want a guy like Ennis Rakestraw or do you want a guy like Braylon Trice? I think is the main question here. I'm a huge Braylon Trice fan, and I'm not so much of an Ennis Rakestraw fan. I mean, you could also go Kamari Lassiter. I'm probably a bigger Kamari Lassiter fan than I am Ennis Rakestraw. But regardless, I'm going to go with Braylon Trice here. Having kind of like the thunder and lightning with Braylon Trice and Yaya Diaby, and Shaquille Barrett's getting up there in age. He's not the same player he used to be, so bringing in some youth to fill that position is always a good idea. Moving on to 27 here, I think this is where we could go with a Byron Murphy. Maybe ever Ennis Rakestraw or Kamari Lassiter as well, but Byron Murphy's a little too talented to pass up on here at 27. Just continuing to build that defense. I mean, they lack talent a lot on that defense, so just continuously building on that defense is, a very good idea in my opinion. Moving on here to 28, we got the Bills, and I know I do this a lot, but I think this has got to be a Gabe Davis replacement. Do you want a Troy Franklin or do you want a Keon Coleman and A.D. Mitchell? Maybe a Jermaine Burton? And I usually like to go Troy Franklin here, but having Josh Allen run around the pocket, creating a circus play and then just lobbing it up to a guy like Keon Coleman is just a fantastic idea in my opinion. I mean, having Keon Coleman, down there for Josh Allen to just launch the ball to and creating those 50-50 balls into more of an 80-20 ball, I mean, I think that's a very, very good idea. And I know it's tough passing on a guy like Troy Franklin for a Keon Coleman, but I think Keon Coleman kind of fits more of the Bills mold, and he's a good pairing alongside Stephon Diggs. Moving on to 29, we got the Lions, and you could look to go offensive line here, but I don't really like what I see, at least on the offensive line. You could go with a Jordan Morgan, but I'm going to look to go with Kamari Lassiter. Like I said, I'm a bit higher on him than I am Ennis Rakestraw. Kamari Lassiter's got everything you want to see. He just lacks a little bit of the athleticism, but I don't think that's necessarily a terrible thing. I don't think he's, below average. I just think he's a bit average as far as athleticism goes. Moving on to 30, we got the Ravens, and Odell Beckham Jr. is probably going to be gone after this season. Rashad Bateman hasn't lived up to the hype. And you got Zay Flowers, but he's more of a slot/undersized receiver. So getting a guy like Troy Franklin who can create separation, create those deep, big plays, and can go up and moss people, I mean, having him and Zay Flowers is a very good pairing for Lamar Jackson to throw to. Moving on to 31, we got the 49ers, and Ennis Rakestraw just seems like a 49er in my opinion. You could also look to go tackle here with Jordan Morgan. What are the other tackles looking like? Yeah, I mean, Kingsley Suamataia, maybe. Patrick Paul has really hurt his stock, so offensive tackle is probably a no-go here. We're going to go with Ennis Rakestraw. And then rounding off the first round, and rounding off this video, we got the Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think it's obvious here, we got to go wide receiver. Although the wide receivers on the team right now, they really stepped up in the playoffs and especially in the Super Bowl, but Marquez Valdes-Scantling isn't going to be there forever. He's not a great receiver, although he did come up clutch in the playoffs. We're going to look to go with his replacement, and we're going to go with A.D. Mitchell. He's basically an MVS that can catch the ball. That's all you really got to know, Chiefs fans. And then that's going to do it. Let me know what you guys think of my mock draft. And as always, if you like the video, consider subscribing. And as always, this is the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.